Hi, I'm Jon Miller. I'm a GT racer in IMSA, SRO, at the Nürburgring, Creventic races, Asian Le Mans, all over the world. I also coach in the Ferrari Challenge Series, both in the US and abroad. We're here today at CXC's headquarters in the Motion Pro 2 simulator, and today's lessons will apply to any simulator, but especially to those who are CXC owners. First things first, you want to have a nice high quality setup. Now what does that mean? It's a few things like having a high quality direct drive steering wheel that gives you a lot of feedback, a lot of feel. Then next you want to have really good pedals. It gives you good braking feel and feedback, good throttle feel. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to get a turnkey package with somebody like CXC Simulations in this Motion Pro 2. So once you get into the sim, you want to make sure that your seating position is correct, and there's a couple different things you want to pay attention to once you sit down. So first thing, you want to adjust the pedals to where you have a nice bend in your knee and you're able to get full extension, full brake pressure, full throttle, and clutch usage without your legs being extended too far. You want your arms to be able to reach the wheel. I kind of measure it by putting my arms straight out, making sure my wrists break over the wheel. This is actually maybe a little too close for me. I'll push it a little further away. There we go. And then just making sure that you have full range of motion on the wheel from lock to lock. Clutch, brake, and throttle, all appropriate with a little bit of bend in the knee, and I'm ready to go. All right, so up next, if you're on a CXC Motion Pro 2 or any other sim with the seatbelt tensioner, make sure your seatbelts are nice and tight and adjusted correctly, just like in the real race car. Tighten them down, shoulder belts, lap belts, and good to go. So next up, if you're on a sim with motion adjustability, make sure that it's adjusted correctly for your preferences. Second, we've got brake pressure. Again, adjust to your taste. And finally, the vibration setting. Adjust to your taste and your preference settings. What you may like may not work for your friend, and vice versa. So I recommend taking a few minutes to play with these, test out a few different settings, and find what works for you. Next up, choose a steering wheel. Make sure it's the one appropriate for the car you're driving in the sim. If you're on a CXC sim and you want to share your data and your telemetry with your teammates or with your sim coach, all you need to do is push this VB Sim button right here. Next up, before you jump into a session in iRacing, you want to set the track conditions and the weather. You have a few different things you can play with here, like humidity, temperature, wind speed, time of day, and starting track state. One way to do it is also to set the track state and weather to be completely static so that it doesn't change throughout the session. Now, this isn't natural to how you would actually drive because obviously the weather and the track state changes throughout the day in real life. However, it's a good way to get a baseline for a car and a track that you've never driven before or that you haven't driven in a while. Once you've got a good baseline and you're kind of in the window, then I would go in and create weather conditions that are likely to match the weather conditions of the real life event that you plan on racing. So if you're going to be racing in the morning, set the weather conditions to match the time of day. And if you're going to be racing there in the summer, you want the temperature to be a little higher, those kinds of things. So you can create the environment that you want within iRacing before you go and drive. And if you find that it's not working for you, you can always jump out and make a change to those track conditions, but it's all doable within iRacing. The next thing to adjust is the force feedback strength. Now that will vary from car to car in real life, just as it'll vary in the sim. You can adjust it via the bar there in the force feedback settings on the menu. And you want to find something that matches the real life car based on whether it has power steering, adjustable power steering, or no power steering at all. And again, this is kind of to your taste and to your preference. And you can really make the wheel difficult to turn with more force feedback, or easier to turn to mimic power steering with a lower force feedback setting. So moving on to car setup. Now, we are racing the 488 GT3 Evo in iRacing because we don't have the Ferrari Challenge car specifically, so we have to try and do some things to this car to make it match or at least approach the feeling of a challenge car. Some of the things we can do are to adjust the brakes. So what we do is we dial the brake bias forward and we raise the ABS settings. We can also add some weight to the car in iRacing. On the top right there, you see weight penalty. You can add some weight to the 48 GT3, and that will affect the car's balance in the corners and it will elongate the brake zones in the GT3 car to mimic more like what you have in the Challenge car. Unfortunately, we can't add horsepower to the GT3 car in iRacing. Obviously, the 488 Challenge car has quite a bit of horsepower, but we're really trying to mimic the brake feel and the handling feel. So we like to add weight. We like to adjust the brake pressure settings on the bias and the ABS by increasing those with a lot of front bias and some extra ABS settings. We can also do things like raise the car up a bit, do some things to take away some of the grip in the corners by raising the ride height, softening the spring rates, things like that. So again, we're trying to mimic more of what the 48 Challenge car feels like by detuning the 48 GT3 a bit and making the braking feel and the handling mimic more like what the Challenge car is like. Now, again, it's a bit of a compromise here, but there are some things we can do. And we've created a setup that we think really gets pretty close. And so if you want to download that, the link is in the description below. So today's lesson will be at round 2 of the Ferrari Challenge North America Championship, which takes place at the Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas. All right, so leaving pit lane here at Circuit of the Americas, or COTA for short. Again, got to respect the blend line, the white line on the right. And we'll do a bit of a slow lap here, just to talk about some of the key points at Circuit of the Americas. Turn 1, obviously a very tight corner there. Coming down into turn 2 here, slow down and show you the setup here. We want to set up way to the left and turn in at a point which is early enough that we can stay full throttle or very close to full throttle all the way through the corner. It's a descending kind of, you're losing altitude all the way through the corner here, losing elevation all the way through the corner. And you want to let the car track out to the left side of the road here. Now, you're going to have to move the car back to the right to set up for the S's, but what I end up seeing a lot of people do at Circuit of the Americas is they compromise turn 2 too much. They lift or they brake through turn 2, and they end up trying to stay too far to the right, and so they're too slow through turn 2. So you want to take turn 2 as fast as you can, track out to the left there, and then set up as best you can for the S's. Now the S's are some of the most well-known corners at Circuit of the Americas. It's an incredible rhythm section, a lot of fun to drive, but the way that you begin the S's here, where you place the car at the start of the S's, is absolutely critical to how you take the entire section here. It's all about rhythm and car placement and getting your eyes all the way through the corner, all the way through to the end of the section of the S's. That will really help your hand placement and your transition of the weight back and forth through the corners. The further ahead you look, the better you will be able to feel and place the car where you want it. And the first S here, as you come under the bridge, it's really critical to have the car pointed as much to the left as you can. So I'm going to set up more here to the left. I'll show you on my flying lap what it's supposed to look like. But you'll notice that as you approach the S's, as you're coming under the bridge, everything comes into view. So you're coming at the section at full throttle, and you really can't see it until you come under the bridge, right where I've parked the car in the shadow. And then everything starts to get really busy. So you'll be flat out through here. You want to carry big entry speed, get as close to those big yellow curbs as you possibly can to maximize the straight line effect through here, or minimize the amount of steering that you're doing, if that makes sense, by getting as close to these big yellow curbs as possible. Now, they are car killers, they are suspension killers in real life, so you want to not get on top of them because they can actually hurt the car in the sim as well. But the idea is as little steering input through there as possible, as far ahead as you can look and think and place the car, and as straight a line as you can make it all the way through the S's. But if you're behind the car in turn 2, if you're still playing catch up at the start of the S's, you're going to be out of sync and you're going to end up doing more turning all the way through the S's, slowing yourself down. So setup for the S's is super critical. Moving on through turns 7 and 8 here. You want to get the car back to the right, and I also see a lot of people overslow this next corner. I tend to carry a lot of speed through here. I try to not brake on the entry, turn in nice and early. Really, I'm almost slowing the car by scrubbing the tires, scrubbing the front tires, and I do track out pretty far to the right. What I end up seeing a lot of people doing here is slowing up for the previous corner and then setting up to the left for this next section. But I find that to be kind of irrelevant because all the speed that you can carry through the previous corner is lap time that you can then really not get back or not maximize on by setting up to the left here. There's not a whole lot to be gained by shorting yourself in the previous corner, compromising the previous corner to maximize this one here. So what I do is big speed through the previous corner, track out all the way. I don't get back too far to the left, and I just end up putting the car right down on the curb here. Now, COTA is notorious for track limits violations, and you have to be willing to play almost within the gray area of track limits, really push the edge of what is allowable and where you can place the car, both in real life and in the sim on iRacing. They're very strict, and in real life, those regulations on how strict they are about track limits may change. This is one of the places where in real life, you need to place the car as much as you can on this completely red inside curb. Now in iRacing, I think if I put the car there, it's gonna give me an off track. It's gonna invalidate the lap. But in real life, this is the setup we want for turn 8 and turn 9 coming up the hill here. All the way to the right, we really wanna use every bit of pavement, which you can see I put my right side tires right up against the grass. And the idea here is I wanna get as straight of a line as possible, as little steering input as possible, up and over the hill so that I can really commit to full throttle right here. And so that by the time I'm at this apex of turn 9, my hands are fairly straight. I'm not doing a ton of turning at the apex here because as I crest over the hill here, the car tends to get light. There's a bit of a steering correction at the top of the hill. But if we've maintained full throttle back before the apex, we can go flat out down the hill here into our next hard brake zone, turn 11. So this is about the brake point before the 50 board on the right. I'm going to back up just a little bit on track here to show you. If you look over to the right, we've got a couple of good visual reference points here approaching turn 11. And the first one is this gantry, this sign bridge. In the real car and in the sim, we should be able to get just beyond that sign bridge before we go full ABS, full threshold brake into turn 11. But that's a good place to start. So I would go where the shadow is, right under the bridge, hard on the brakes. I think you'll find pretty quickly that you can go deeper than that. The next reference point is the red paint where it meets the green paint. So that's another maybe 2 to 3 car lengths deeper. Another good place to really hammer on the brakes. Once you've got the car slowed down enough there and you've got that visual reference point dialed in, now you want to see if you can get to the 100 board. And the 100 board lines up exactly with this white line in the green paint. And that should translate into the real world track as well. They always make changes to the real world tracks. So if you can do a track walk to verify all these things on the race weekend, that's hugely valuable to compare what you've done in the sim to what is actually there in real life. So approaching turn 11, hard on the brakes, full ABS, nice late turn in, lots of steering input, squeeze on the gas, and full throttle down the straightaway. Now, into a great passing opportunity here. If you can get a good run off of turn 11, hard on the brakes, full ABS, all the way to the track out there, second gear, very tight 90-degree corner, approaching the turn 13, 14, 15 section, very technical, very tight here. Approaching turn 15, you want to really get a nice wide entry here, really V it off, carry a bunch of big speed into 14, brake in a straight line, turn nice and late, down to second gear for this one, and then exit out in second gear. Again, you're really going to be playing with track limits both in the sim and in real life. Getting it back to the left for one of my favorite sections of COTA, the turn 16, 17, 18, kind of triple apex sweeper, carrying big speed through the middle here. You want to get the car rotated. Generally, you pick up a big understeer right here. So if you can manage the understeer through the middle of the corner and commit to full throttle as you approach turn 19, You're going to carry a lot of mid-corner speed, a lot of rolling speed through there, and there's a lot of lap time to be gained through that sector. Turn 19, the track again starts to fall away from you, and this turn 19 exit is another track limits place where you have to really be careful and play with as much room as you're given by the stewards. Into the final corner, turn 20, hard on the brakes, final threshold brake opportunity. There's a bit of camber to the road there, and then full throttle on out to the exit, again playing with track limits on the exit to complete the lap at COTA. So a few critical areas to create lap time. Track limits is definitely going to be part of the conversation, both in the sim and in real life here, so something to be aware of. This is a great track, one of my favorites, and let's start a flying lap now to show you what that's like. All right, here we go into turn 1. Full throttle, nice hard braking uphill. The hill will help the car slow down, so we're gonna brake nice and late. We're gonna have some good brake reference markers in real life. The sim is a little difficult there. We wanna get close to that white line as we go to the brakes, but biggest thing is to maximize turn 2 here, full throttle through turn 2, big speed. Set up for the S's, like I said, critical about where you enter the S's, light brush the brakes through the middle. Try not to brush the brakes too hard. Carry big rolling speed through there, partial throttle, trying to just carry momentum. No brush of the brakes there, just a lift. Now we set up all the way to the right here like I talked about, maximizing our track width, trying to stay full throttle up over the crest. Oh, a little lift there. Flat down the hill. Trying to get to the 100 board on the brakes there. Tires are nice and warm now. Car stops beautifully. Little patience on the throttle, and then hammer down on the back straightaway. Approaching a great passing zone here into turn 12. Try and take a breath. Set the brake pads, look for my brake reference point, look for the 150 board on the right. Try and go full ABS right at the 150 board. There's also a white line on the side of the track that matches up with the 150 board. That's another visual reference point. That was turn 12, now into 13, 14, 15, really technical section here. Got a lot of steering wheel in and a lot of throttle at the same time. Car's gonna move around a lot through here. Really gonna lean on the front tires a lot through this section. You can manage not to crank too much wheel in and overdrive the fronts, so you'll be able to preserve them and hopefully be a little bit faster at the end of the race than your competitors. Big commitment section through the carousel there, turn 17, 18, approaching 19, light brush the brakes. Don't brake too late there. I'd rather brake early, turn early, and use all the track at the exit. Same thing with 20. Try and brake a little earlier, and then track out all the way early to throttle as we complete the lap at Circuit of the Americas here in the Ferrari 48 Challenge car / GT3. All right, so final thoughts on COTA in the Ferrari 48 Challenge on iRacing here. This is one of my favorite tracks. It's one of the only F1 tracks that we get to race on. And as I mentioned in my previous lap video, we really are gonna play with track limits here a lot. It's just the nature of the beast when we come to a track like this that has a lot of runoff. So both in the sim and in real life, you need to really get comfortable with using all of the road and then some, getting up over the curbs, both at the apex and the track out. There's a couple critical places here, like we talked about earlier. The setup for the S's, the start of the S's, really getting your vision all the way through the S's. Once you've approached them and they come into view, right as you come under the bridge there, it's like all of a sudden this huge technical section of track just all of a sudden pops into view. So you have to start to spend a lot of time visualizing, and that's where I think the simulator comes into play. The more time you can spend preparing and visualizing, getting the track really imprinted in your mind's eye so that you know what to expect when you show up to the race weekend, that extra bit of preparation will really serve you well in attacking that section of track. You've also got places like turn 12, 13, 14, 15, that really tight technical section there where the grandstands are. There's a lot of action, a lot of overtaking. It's also a place where you tend to be trying to accelerate and turn the car a lot at the same time. So if you can manage your steering inputs through there and really try and keep the car planted without inducing too much oversteer, too much understeer, that's going to be a place where you can really start to work on your tire management skills as well. So I would spend some time focusing on those two sections in the sim so that when you show up to the race weekend, you've got something to work on in the real car that will pay dividends as well.